Coming up on this episode.
Usually the big think videos are quite good, but in this case I had a bit of disagreement and worry about the points. He seems to, I don't know, dance around the actual issue.
He doesn't really address the reason why there aren't men in those areas.
Women are growing and moving on, and men need to adapt and come with us.
Oh boy, now this debate about male and female brains.
Yeah, because what about non-binary people? What about trans people? It's just skipping over a lot of stuff.
Of course, sometimes somebody, regardless of gender, has a part of the brain which says that it's important, but has other issues preventing them.
So he's skipping over a lot of things.
Hello, Internet. This is Red Angel here, and I have as my guest this time my friend Al. How are you doing, Al?
I'm good, thank you. I've been studying loads and being busy, but I'm good.
And I'm doing pretty well. And do you want to tell anyone here about yourself? And
I am mostly volunteering with like Skeptic Haven and shows that promote like atheism and activism for atheism. So I'm mostly in the background, not always on screen. So yeah, that's me. And I run my own Discord server where I'm also hoping to be able to help people that need help. Because deconverting from religion and everything that goes with it can be quite scary and traumatic. So a little bit of help, I think, can be good.
Are there any links that you would like to share?
No, not really at this moment. I mean, you know, my Discord server, but yeah, it's a public server. I'm sure people will find us eventually. It's Heretic Hideout if anybody's interested in joining.
And since this is the show is tearing down terrible videos together, so obviously we've found a terrible video that we want to tear down together.
Yes.
And since you're the one who selected it this time, would you care to tell us what it is and what it's about?
Usually the big think videos are quite good, but in this case I had a bit of disagreement and worry about the points. His name is Richard Reeves, and he's on Big Think, and he wrote a book called Of Boys and Men. So I think his overall intention is to help boys and men, which is perfectly fine. It's all good, but there were some things in his video that I disagree with, and I thought we can discuss it today.
So it's not so much that the video as a whole is terrible, but that there are some terrible things in it.
Yes.
Is what you're...
Yes.
Okay,
and
so it's not...
That's really obvious, and it annoyed me that he couldn't just see it or say it or understand it. He seems to, I don't know, dance around the actual issue instead of just saying this is the issue and this is how we should or could tackle it. He dances around it and then makes up other reasons for it, which are probably good reasons, but still.
Okay, so I guess without any further ado, we'll get now to the video.
A number of people warned me against writing a book about boys and men because it's such a fraught subject, particularly in politics right now, and because so many people were afraid that merely drawing attention to the problems of boys and men was implying somehow less effort being paid to girls and women, that it's framed as a zero-sum, and it's sort of a whose side are you on question.
Have you ever seen that attitude in feminist circles? Because I haven't.
No, I haven't either, because in feminist circles, it is about men just as much as women, because it's about equality for everybody. So I think he made a good point that he's not trying to take away from the issues women are facing. So I'm thinking him addressing this head on is a good thing for him. It's a good thing.
You have to be on one side or the other rather than just being on the side of human flourishing. One of the real challenges here is that if there are men missing from certain crucial areas of our society and our economy, that makes it harder for other men and boys to flourish in those areas. We have an education system that has a dearth of male teachers. We have a labour market where the jobs that are growing fastest are ones where we have the fewest men. And
Okay, so and anyways, so but he doesn't really address really the reason why there aren't men in those areas.
No, and I've got a bit I want to say about that when we actually get to that part, because he's got 3 reasons that he lists for those, and I'm like, yeah, okay, so there are good reasons, but he doesn't really understand the underlying issue. Because yeah, I would think you would need to go to these men and ask them, why do you not want to be a nurse? And there's probably a good reason they don't want to be a nurse. So yeah, like I said, there's an obvious reason for these things, and he seems to be missing it.
Or even if it's a bad reason, there's a good reason why the men are fixated on the bad reason.
Yes, yes, and that needs to be addressed, and that needs to change first. It's not as easy as, oh, men are now being treated unfairly, and that's why they're not in that industry. It's like, no. They choose not to be in that industry. They've got just as
And
much
we have to address.
opportunity. Yeah.
in families, there's the growth in what you might call the dad deficit or fatherlessness. As men are struggling in each of those areas, what you'll see is it'll be harder for other men to follow in their footsteps. It's harder for boys to flourish if their fathers aren't engaged. It's harder for men to enter occupations where there aren't men. It's harder for boys to do well at school where there are no male teachers to be seen. And so there's a very real danger that unless we act quite soon, that we will set in train something of a vicious cycle.
And again, this is something which I've repeatedly heard discussed in feminist circles. This is not something that feminists at all ignore.
No, I've heard this quite a bit, men being left behind, and it is a big thing, but it's also just as much on the men to adapt. Like, the situations have changed, and women are growing and moving on, and men need to adapt and come with us. That's what we want.
When people speak of
behind.
When people speak of male privilege, what that means is that the patriarchy doesn't harm men as much as it harms women, but that doesn't mean that the patriarchy doesn't harm men.
No, they're just not always aware of it, and that's the frustrating part. They're not really always aware of the harm they suffer themselves under the patriarchy, because they think, no, I'm a big alpha male. I've got big dick, so I'm good. But that's not the case.
I'm Richard Reeves. I'm a senior fellow at the Brookings Institution, and my latest book is Of Boys and Men, Why the Modern Male is Struggling, Why That Matters, and What to Do About it.
Now, I looked up the Brookings Institution. It's considered kind of center-left in American politics, but from what I hear, that would mean that it would sound rather conservative in any of the other Western democracies, because
so I think him trying to help men is a good thing. Him writing this book is a good thing. I think just he's missing some very obvious points everywhere, which is frustrating.
The overall picture is that on almost every measure, at almost every age, and in almost every advanced economy in the world, the girls are leaving the boys way behind, and the women leaving the men.
And now we discuss men in education and that.
Yeah.
What nobody expected was that girls and women wouldn't just catch up to boys and men in education, but would blow right past them and keep going. Everyone was very focused, quite rightly, on getting to gender equality, getting to gender parity. It's not that long ago where there was a huge gender gap the other way, and there was huge focus, correctly, in the 70s and 80s to really promote women and girls in education. But the line just kept going, and nobody predicted that. Nobody was saying, what if gender inequality reemerges in just as big a way as now, in some cases bigger, but the other way around? And to some extent, everyone's still trying to get their head around this new world where, at least in education, when you talk about gender inequality, you're pretty much always talking about the ways in which girls and women are ahead of boys and men. And that's happened in a very, very short period of human history. So if you look at the US,
I
Any comment?
disagree. I disagree. I think boys and men have the same opportunities as us, and we have been denied progress for so long that we would grab those opportunities, rightly so, and go at it and just make the best of it and excel. And he's like, yeah, against expectations, we excel. Of course, we did. We excelled at it. And now it's unfair to the boys that we did. It's like, no, no, no. You've got the same opportunities as us. You can grab these same opportunities and do the same thing. But because patriarchy has taught you that everything will just fall on your lap and everything will just work out, because you're a man, you might actually then feel a bit more relaxed and think, I don't have to work as hard because everything will just be given to me because I am a man. Where us, we know we will get all if we don't work hard and go at it. And so girls will work hard because we have to prove ourselves. We have to work hard to just be seen and acknowledged and get equal pay. So yeah, cry me a river. It's unfair, boo-hoo, I don't care. Men can also work hard, they've got the same opportunities, and that's all I wanted to say at this bit.
And still to this day, the gender pay gap persists, still favoring men.
Exactly. Exactly. But now he wants to say there's a gender inequality, but it's the other way. Oh please. I disagree with that completely. There's not a gender equality the other way when it comes to education. It's just men need to pick up the slack and just go at it the same way we did. How did they do it before we actually entered school? They did it. So why the would it now matter that we now entered the school? Like, okay. Yeah, boo-hoo, it's unfair. So we excelled at it. Whoop-de-doo.
for example, in the average school district in the US, girls are almost a grade level ahead of boys in English and have caught up in math. If we look at those with the highest GPA scores, the top 10%, 2/3 of those are girls. If we look at those at the bottom, 2/3 of those are boys. When it comes to going to college, there's a 10 percentage gap in college enrollment, a similar size gap in completing college, conditional on enrolling. And the result of those trends is that the gender gap in getting a college degree is now wider than it was in 1972, but the other way around.
But still, men get paid more for the same job.
Exactly. And I have to actually mention something that this might be the case in the US, but this is definitely not the case in Australia. In Australia, we get something called HEX debt for university studies. So, yeah, a woman might have a uni degree, but we have that uni debt tied to this uni degree, where the government actually sort of pays subsidies for men to go do a trade vocational thing like electrician, and they don't have that debt. So we both enter the workforce at a certain age, at the same age, but women would have that debt, where men would not have that debt. Plus, they would get paid more for the same level industry. So women are still worse off. Doesn't matter how you look at it. Women are still worse off.
There is also a serious college debt problem in the US as well, which no
Yeah.
government wants to do anything about because that might offend some rich people.
Yeah. So now women have more college degrees. Okay, awesome, good. They also have that accompanying debt. And if they say a doctor or whatever industry, they will be paid less than men still. So they would still be worse off. It's just, he's just missing obvious points here. He's going to be like, Crimea River, men are okay, like the human race is suffering. There's a few complicated issues tied to the education system and the uni system. But just saying, yeah, it's not cool that men don't have college degrees. Like they've got the same opportunity. Yeah, they can just go for it themselves, or yeah, become an electrician or do a trade job like it's here in Australia, and then they don't actually have that debt tied to that industry, tied to that certificate. So yeah.
So in 1972, when Title IX was passed to promote more gender equality in education, there was a 13 percentage point gap in favor of men getting college degrees. Now there's a 15 percentage point gap in favor of women getting college degrees. So the gender inequality we see in college today is wider than it was 50 years ago. It's just the other way around. There's quite a fierce debate about the differences between male and female brains.
Oh boy, now this debate about male and female brains, and we know this is going to be an excrement show.
Yeah, well, he did say that, well, if we play the video a bit further, he did say that there's no real difference between adult male and adult female brains, which I'm happy he addressed that, because there is no difference. But then he goes on with, yeah, but there might be developmental differences between boys and girls. And I thought, well, there might be. I haven't actually looked that up. But his solution to it is just, just
yeah, and it involves a lot of gender essentialism.
Which doesn't work.
Exactly.
And in adulthood, I think there's not much evidence that the brains are that different in ways that we should worry about, or that
that's what you just said, of course, right?
Yeah.
Are particularly consequential. But where there's no real debate is in the timing of brain development. It is quite clear that girls' brains develop more quickly than boys' brains do, and that the biggest difference seems to occur in adolescence.
Okay, this is where the gender essentialism really kicks in.
Yeah, because what about non-binary people? What about trans people? It's just skipping over a lot of stuff. And it's just like, yep. And then his solution about boys needing to, yeah, we'll get to that, but I just don't agree with it.
So what happens is in adolescence, we develop what neuroscientists call the prefrontal cortex. The prefrontal cortex of our brain is sometimes known as the CEO of the brain. It's the bit of your brain that says you should do your chemistry homework rather than going out to party. It's the bit of your brain that says it is worth maintaining a high GPA because it will help you get to college, which might help you in the future. And
yeah, of course, sometimes somebody, regardless of gender, has a part of the brain which says that it's important to put off short-term pleasure for a long-term reward, but has other issues preventing them from really effectively working toward that. That has nothing to do with gender, of course.
Yeah, ADHD. So he's skipping over a lot of things. There's a lot of reasons, like ADHD kids, regardless of gender, would need that help, would need some help from the parents, of course. That needs to recognize my kid is struggling. This is why they might be struggling. I need to understand this is how their brain works. Sometimes these tasks are just too difficult to achieve. They hit a wall, ADHD, and so they can't complete these tasks that might be easier for other kids of any gender, because gender doesn't really have anything to do with completing a task, for example. There's girls as well that think, oh God, I don't want to complete my chemistry homework. And they might actually just put it off, or they might just be like me, get it done and get it over with. So it's just, yeah, I just don't agree with how this guy is tackling the issue, because boys are now behind. Yeah, he's now like sad and it's unfair. Girls are overtaking boys. So boo-hoo, we need to find a reason for that. Instead of actually just addressing the point, like boys need to just pull up their socks and they need to just study, or like recognize there's ADHD that might be preventing kids from excelling as maybe other kids might be. But it's not that massive difference that boys' brains are just developing differently, and now they're behind the women, and now we need to fix that. And you what? Take the women down a notch or two so that we can up the men again. I just don't agree with this dude in this point.
Also, autism. Many times, autistic kids are too busy coping with being in trouble for breaking a rule that they didn't, an unspoken rule they didn't even know was there, and to actually, and it's and the trauma, this trauma can interfere with studies.
OCD kids. I was an OCD kid because I still have OCD, but it's more OCD tendencies and mannerisms that's tied to autism. So that also can hinder a child because you've got these certain rules and things that you've made up in your head of how things should be and how you should study. And if you don't achieve that, you're not a good student. So you sort of undermine your own effort. I don't know if any of that makes sense, but yeah, there's a lot of at play when it comes to kids. And then there's intelligent kids as well that might need that extra help as well. You think, yeah, they're intelligent, they don't. Of course they do, because they can get hyper focused on something and then quickly jump to the next thing and then quickly jump to the next thing without actually completing anything because they're just so interested in everything. So their brains just jump around. So
Or
even
actually,
those kids need help.
or sometimes an intelligent kid may get so sidetracked, basically they may get bored at a certain point in class, and then they might do by delving so much into the rabbit hole of one specific area in the subject that they tune out when the teacher goes into other areas related to the subject, and before they know it, they have a nice F, a
Yes,
nice
and that
failing
happens to
grade.
smart kids. Yes, and that happens to smart kids. Like I said, you have to understand that their brain sometimes needs that focus, and you need to get them back onto focus because they can over fixate on something that they think this is amazing, that I'm curious, and then over fixate on it and completely miss the rest of it completely. And that could be an autistic thing as well. But yeah, he's completely
Yeah,
missing the whole point. And that can be across any gender or no gender. It's not a thing that's just tied to a certain, oh, it's a boy thing. It's an educational problem, and he's just not actually addressing this issue, for example, at all. He's just saying, no, boys develop differently. That's the end of it. That's why they're so shit at school. They develop differently. Like, no, there's a myriad of reasons that is completely just not addressing or discussing. So I have an issue with this.
let's go on.
That bit of the brain develops considerably earlier in girls than in boys, between 1 and 2 years earlier, partly because girls go into puberty a bit earlier than boys, and that seems to trigger some of this development. What that means is that if you have an education system that rewards the ability to turn in homework, stay on task, worry about your GPA, prepare for college, and so on, then just structurally, that's going to put an advantage the group whose brains have developed earlier in those particular areas. And that turns out on average to be girls. I think it's a great irony of women's progress that by taking the brakes off women's educational opportunities and aspirations, we've revealed the fact that the education system is slightly structured against boys and men.
Oh yeah, that reminds me how I've heard about people claim. Oh, sorry, you were saying
Go on.
something.
No, I was
How
just
people,
telling
how
my guy it's because he's just an idiot.
yeah, people were complaining about how churches were overly feminine, and that was a problem, that churches were so overly feminine. And I'm talking about and thing is that they're forgetting it. Those are churches that will not even ordain a woman.
Yeah. No, but women are the reason that made us unfairly. So whoop de fucking do.
What did you say?
We've
Could you
heard
repeat
this
that? Could you
before.
repeat? Could
I
you
said,
repeat
yeah,
that? What you just said?
I said, yeah, women are the reason men are being treated unfairly. So it's always going to be the women. Whoop de fucking do. It's our fault they don't excel or they are treated unfairly. Because they can't like look inwardly and start blaming themselves. Like, I might be the reason I do not excel. No, it's the women's fault. It's just easier. I'm just going to blame them and the education system. It's not me.
Because of these differences in the timing of brain development. But it took the women's movement to show that, because the natural advantages of women in education were impossible to see when women's aspirations were being capped by a sexist society. Now that
Finally, he said one thing correct.
Yes.
those caps have been largely removed, we can see that it's boys and men who are at a disadvantage in the education system. At the risk of sounding boring, let's collect the data first so we know what we're dealing with here. I do think that we should be strongly encouraging boys to start school a year later than girls.
First of all, and it gets worse in 1 second.
I think that should become the default in many school districts.
Let me hear that again.
School a year later than girls. I think that should become the default in many school districts.
You hear that? That it should be the default in many.
Yeah. And then again,
What that mean?
you have Sorry, go on.
I try to give him the benefit of the doubt, but the only way I can interpret that is when you were born, the doctor looked at your private parts, and based on what the doctor determined from your private parts, your when you go to start school will be determined by that.
Yeah, it's like red shirt boys. Like, what the fuck is a red shirt boy? So now you born with a penis, you're going to wear a red shirt and you're going to go to school later. I feel like no, this would might disadvantage some kids that don't have this issue he's talking about, where they don't just get on with it and excel. Like, and then you've got non-binary people, you've got trans people, and he's also sort of ignores all that. And then will the boys and girls then be like in the same classes? Will the girls finish school earlier? What the fuck did he think? How will this work? It just, yeah, I just think he's just missing the point. He's now adding this stupid solution to the problem that he's addressing. He's saying there's a problem. I'm seeing a problem of boys not studying in school. So let's address that. Let's look at the reasons and address that. But now he's throwing this half-assed solution to the problem, which isn't a solution. It's just, yeah, putting boys in the school a year later, and girls will just
Now,
go to
if
school. I feel like that's fucking unfair.
if they had a system of individually assessing children for their readiness and determining when the kids start school based on that, and if just one gender happens to more likely start early than the other, that's fine. But the problem is to the problem is when you start automatically doing that based on what gender is assigned to that
Yeah.
child.
Yeah, because if a kid that's born in February is in the same school year than a kid that's born in, say, November, I feel like, especially on early age, that's a massive developmental difference. The one born in November might need to then go to the next school year to be sort of on par with the rest of the kids. Like, that's a good assessment to do with kids. Like, yeah, there's an age difference, but that won't be for any gender or no gender. It's not like it's a gender thing. I think like it's assessing kids,
Exactly.
if they're ready for school and what level they should be. Because maybe a smart kid needs to be in a different level. Fuck knows. But yeah, there's some issues with the educational system. But letting boys just across the board by default start later just because they have a penis seems like a stupid solution.
I agree.
Because of the developmental gap that there is between boys and girls. Because boys' brains mature more slowly, then them starting school a year later would mean that they were developmentally closer to being peers with the girls in the classroom. We need a lot more male teachers. It's striking that the teaching profession has become steadily more female over time. Only 24% of K-12 teachers now are male. That's down.
Don't you remember those really old TV shows like Little House and things where it was like always the teacher was a woman?
Yeah, but he's also obviously missing the obvious point. It's not desirable to be a teacher because they have all sorts of things playing up. Like they've got shit pay. They don't really get any support these days. Teachers can't do anything or say anything, or they will get fired, or they're not allowed to even talk to girls these days in Florida about their periods, for example. It's all like, why the hell would you become a teacher? He's not addressing that point. Yeah, there's some women in the teaching industry, but being a teacher is not a desirable job, not for men, not for women. So there's that obvious point he's completely missing in that fact.
In the 80s, and fewer men are applying to teacher training year on year. And so we've seen this steady shift towards a close to an all-female environment. That has all kinds of consequences for the ethos of the school, for the way we deal with different kinds of behavior among boys and girls, for example. And so we
Again, what about the way they treat neurodivergent kids?
Yep. Like that definitely needs to be addressed because, like I said, those kids need some sort of extra help a school and the parents need to acknowledge my kid has ADHD, my kid has autism, my kid has OCD tendencies, um, my kid has dyslexia, all sorts of things can play up. But in, like, for example, in South Africa, those things are frowned upon because the aim should be normal. You should be normal. Your kid doesn't have autism because my kid is normal, and that's the end of it. I don't want to hear anything more about it because if you've got autism, you're from the devil, and that's the end of that. Everybody's fucking normal. So everybody needs to be treated the same way. And I feel like, yeah, there's a lot of issues in the education system across the globe.
Wasn't there a pastor in Tennessee, a pastor in Tennessee, who actually blamed autism on demons or something?
South Africans do that too, like I just said. Autism is something that happens to your kid because you are sinful, or it's from the devil, or there's a reason for it. It's not a, oh, my kid developed, or my kid is just different, their brain is different. And that is awesome. I should actually celebrate this. My kid is awesome, because I think autism is awesome. I really do. Your brain just works differently. It's just, yeah, it's really fucking hot actually. But yeah, they don't see it that way. They see it as it's not normal, and if it's not normal, it's not from God, and there must be issues with this. So everybody
In other
ignores
words,
it.
religious superstition.
Yes, yes, for sure.
We need a very serious and intentional effort to get more men into teaching. The third thing I would
Also, what about toxic masculinity?
Yeah, yeah, because if you think teaching is just for women, why in the hell will you apply to be a teacher? Why do you think you need to teach anybody? You know everything, and you're going to hold on to your little knowledge. Why would you pass on any knowledge to any other person, or have a caring role, or have a mentor role if you're the alpha male? You know, toxic masculinity. So it's the same with nursing.
do in
There's
this
reasons for men
world
not being in that industry, and it's because they choose to not be in that industry. And there's reasons they choose to. And that's the thing he needs to go and address, is why do they choose to? Not because women or that it's unfairly skewed. It's not unfairly fucking skewed. Men choose not to be there. Address that.
where I have significant power to dictate policies would be significantly more investment in vocational education and training. That is an area where we do seem to see better results for boys and men on average, and one that's woefully underinvested in the US. The US.
You talk about that, how basically you discussed that problem with that solution in
Hmm.
earlier in the. Is there anything more you want to add about that now?
No, just that again, men excel at that industry, and it's also women that's not present in that industry. A nice thing that the Australian government is doing is, if you're a business and you are going to employ an electrician, they will give you a subsidy to employ a woman electrician over a man electrician, just so that we can get some equality back, where you've got like 50% women, 50% men electricians. So they're trying to get more women into these trade positions, because they understand that it's men dominated. So yeah, I agree with him. Vocational training for men is important, but it's just as important to women. We can't ignore women. I guess maybe in the US they don't invest that much in vocational training, but it's definitely the opposite in Australia. So here you get all sorts of subsidies and, yeah, and things paid for becoming a tradesman of any trade.
Really bet most of its dollars on a very academic, a very narrow route towards success, and less emphasis on vocational training. And that has actually put boys and men at a disadvantage. So apprenticeships, technical high schools are actually a really good way to help more boys and men.
So I guess that's all he's going to say about the technical school part. And
Yeah,
he's
he's not
about to.
even going to address that that will then also be a gender gap the other way around, because he's only focused on the gender gap now, the way towards men in his mind. That's all he's focused on. But he's not going to address that. Yeah, there's a massive gender gap in the trade industry because women are told you shouldn't be doing things like that with your hand. You should be this fine, beautiful little thing and delicate. You shouldn't be doing an electrician job or anything. So women are being discouraged in society for going after these jobs. Becoming a mechanic is not something that's deemed to be desirable. How will you get a husband if you're a mechanic? That's a man's job. So it's a societal thing, and he's clearly not addressing that. It's the same. It's a societal thing why men don't want to become teachers or why men don't want to become nurses, because it's a woman's job. And it's the same, mechanic, electrician, that's a man's job. And that's the thing that we as a society need to address. Instead of saying now men are not present in these industries and it's skewed unfairly towards men and that's bad and we need to encourage men to go then. But it's a thinking behind it that is not even addressing. And men choose not to be there. It's not like we're forcing them out.
But speaking of those who are being forced out, um, as you may know, the southern United States is becoming increasingly a dangerous place for transgender people, and
Yep.
it's becoming. It was already terrible when I lived in East Tennessee, and I hear it's only gotten worse. And I really wish that I could that I had the resources to set up a charity to help transgender people from that area get out and have a place to stay until they get on their feet in a more tolerant area. But unfortunately, I do not have those resources. But what I can do is mention Alfred's GoFundMe page in this show. Alfred is transgender and lives in the southern United States and is trying to get out of there and needs people's help needs funds to get out. He needs everyone's help. And so I'm going to put on the screen now for a moment the QR code and for the audio the QR code for his GoFundMe and for the audio only audience, I'm going to also put a link to Alfred's GoFundMe in this video's YouTube video description area. And I also put a link to Alfred's GoFundMe in my page of links, which is at redangelsophia.com. And remember, I spell Sophia with a PH. I added a link to Alfred's GoFundMe in my page of links. Anything to add to that?
Yeah, people should help if they can help.
Yeah, people. I mean, we totally understand you may not have the money to help Alfred, but if you do have the money to spare, please do so. You could be saving a life.
And if you don't have the money, share it on your social media, on your Twitter, and get it out there so that Alfred can actually get help and get out.
Indeed. Anyways, let's go on.
I think one of the challenges with this debate is that if you're talking to women and men who are, say, at the top of the economic ladder, 4-year college degrees, decent incomes, they look around and they don't see some of these issues. But that's not the same for working class men. That's not the same for men lower down the economic ladder. So there's a danger that we're so busy, to borrow Cheryl's.
Again, something I've heard a lot about in feminist circles. To claim that feminists disregard this, it's like, where have you been?
Yeah. And is rightly so talking about the class differences and class divides and economic differences, and that is a major thing. But that doesn't just affect the men. He's ignoring that it affects women as well. It affects a society. And he's like, yeah, men and inequality, and men is now being treated unfairly, and it's to do with economic. But yeah, women are treated unfairly too. The class divides is just a shit thing across for society across the board. It's not just a man thing. So that annoyed me too when he said that. I'm like, yeah, that's a good point. Economic and class divides and things are harmful, but it's not just harmful for men. So please just make sure you mention women as well. He seems to not care.
Okay.
So busy leaning in that we don't look down. The reality for men further down the ladder is very different.
Now he talks about men in the workforce.
Economic trends for men have turned downwards along 4 dimensions. One is wages. Most men today earn less than most men did in 1979.
Yeah, that's because wages are going down because we have to make sure that those capitalist CEOs get their bonuses.
Yes, but he's also missing an obvious point. In 1979 onwards, women started joining the workforce. And because we're seen as the weaker, lesser sex and have to start being paid equally, that might have also driven wages down just because of misogyny and sexism. So there's a few maybe complicated reasons for the wages to have gone down. Not just, yeah, men are paid less and this is an issue. It's just, yeah, we need to look at it in and it's complicated situation that it is. But he seems to ignore a lot, this guy.
In employment, with a drop in labour force participation of 8 percentage points, which means 9 million men now of prime age are not working, we've seen a drop in occupational stature. And so there are now more men working in employment areas which are seen as lower status than they were in the past. And we've also seen a drop in the acquisition of skills, the kinds of skills and education that boys and men need. If boys don't get educated and men don't get skilled, they will struggle in the labour market. And across all of those domains, we've seen a downwards turn for men in the last 4 or 5 decades. And so
again, he's ignoring the point that status might have dropped because women actually entered the workforce and is now doing the job a man didn't think she was equal to do in the first place. So of course the status would fall for certain jobs. That's just how it's going to be. Because we're not supposed to be equal to them. Entering the workforce is not desirable. It's not ideal for us to be equal to them. And so status will fall, wages will fall. That's, yeah, and he's missing that point.
Way in which social class divides have opened up, economic inequality has widened, is really important to understand in the context of gender inequality. If we only focus on gender gaps, then we miss the fact that both men and women at the top have done increasingly well, but that's much less true of everybody else, and especially it's less true of those from lower income backgrounds, working class boys and men, and black boys and men. You see many of those trends are amplified, and so those...
Yeah. Again, not something that any feminist that I've seen ignores.
No.
Those boys and men are really at the sharpest end of many of the social and economic changes. On the one hand, we have a huge and successful and laudable effort to get more women into STEM jobs, so science, technology, engineering, and math. On the other side, we have what I call HEAL jobs. So that's health, education, administration, and literacy. Almost, if you like, the opposite side of a coin to STEM jobs. And that's where a lot of the jobs are coming from. Health and education alone are huge and growing sectors in the US. And so by my estimates, for every 1 job we're going to create in STEM between now and 2030, we're going to create 3 in HEAL jobs. But those jobs are at least as gender segregated as STEM jobs, but in the other direction.
Okay, segregated is not the word I would use, because segregated means that the jobs will not allow certain people to have them.
Yeah. But it's also, again, missing the whole point that certain jobs are not desirable for men because of the way they think it's a woman's job. It's not a manly job. It affects my masculinity. I will be mocked as a nurse, so I can't go into that industry. There's clear reasons for that, and it's patriarchy, misogyny, and sexism, which badly affects men. And he's just saying men is not going into that industry. Well, they're not being kept out. It's not like we're closing the door and saying, oh, we don't want you to become a nurse. They've got equal opportunities to become a nurse or to become a teacher, to go into the administration industry. the administration part of the heel jobs he was talking about, but they just don't. So they choose not to be there. And that is something he's not actually addressing at all. Why do men choose not to be there? That's what he needs to go after. And that's the mindset that he needs to change, because men, if you go and actually ask a bunch of men, some of the answers they might give is, yeah, the pay is shit, or that's a woman's job, or my dad said I should work with my hands and not care about being a teacher, or whatever. There's societal and reasons for the drive behind men going after certain jobs and not others because they choose to. And that's something he's completely not addressing. He's just saying, yeah, it's unfairly skewed. There's a massive gender gap. Like what? Are the women keeping men away from these jobs? Like, what the f is he saying? Go ask the men, why are you not a nurse? And they could tell him why.
Indeed.
And unlike STEM, becoming more so over time. So if you look at the heel sector, only 24% of the workers in those sectors are male, and that number is falling. And in particular sectors, we're seeing a really precipitous drop in the number of men. We have a drop in the number of male teachers.
Again, there have been times when there were more male teachers than there are now, but haven't there been times when there were fewer male teachers?
Yep. I mean,
We
it's a
have
more
a
complicated
very
issue. It has to do with the education system themselves and the pay and how teachers are being treated. So it's a more complex issue than just men on teachers anymore. It's not like they're being kept out. They choose not to be there. The job is shit. The pay is shit. There's a whole bunch of reasons. Like, he's not addressing everything. He's just looking at one thing. It's like he's got a like horse eye thing on. Let's just focus on this one thing, and men only being left behind. They're being untreated unfairly. Like, some of that's their choice, my dude, Richard. Some of that's their choice.
Sharp, the number of male psychologists. That's dropped from 39% male to 29% male in the last decade alone. And among psychologists under the age of 30, only 5% are male. So we roll that forward, and we're going to see psychology become essentially almost an all-female profession. So these jobs...
My psychologist is male.
Mine is male too.
Granted, this is technically anecdotal evidence, technically, but just figured I'd mention that anyway.
Yeah.
Which are both crucial, I think, for society, and where it'd be very useful to have more diversity, are actually becoming more gender segregated. And so we have absolutely no effort to get more men into the heel jobs, which is where I think the future lies and where we should be helping men to move. One of the problems that we face is what I call in the book a dad deficit.
Again, I've heard the dad deficit discussed a lot in feminine spaces.
Yeah.
And that can be seen in various different ways. So 1 in 4 fathers don't live with their children. If parents split up, they're much more likely to lose contact with their fathers and with their mothers. And so 1 in 3 children, if their parents split up, don't see their father at all.
How much is this due to any system, and how much... I would strongly suspect that toxic masculinity also plays a role here.
Yes, definitely. And I mean, what are you to do if you're in a relationship and it's not a healthy, happy relationship? You can't stay in that relationship just for the kid, for the sake of the kid. That's not fair to both the man and the woman and that kid. So yes, this is a problem. People split up. It's something humans do. They don't stay together forever. But it's also that the dad's choice how active he wants to be in his children's life. He can organize or negotiate with the mother of his children, how often he can see them. I mean, she's not a fucking heartless bitch. just ask and be more present. I just don't understand. They're not it's not like they're being kept out. It's a choice. Toxic masculinity, like you said, there's choices they can make. It's not going to be easy splitting up with somebody. It's not going to be always feel like it's always going to be fair. But it's also that the dad's choice how active he wants to be in his children's life. He can organize or negotiate with the mother of his children, how often he can see them. I mean, she's not a fucking heartless bitch. Just ask and be more present. I don't but it is what it is. It was the best choice for that couple at that point of time to split up. And then you as a father need to then say, well, I want to be active in my child's life. I'll be at sport events. I'll have the child every weekend or whatever the you arrange with the mother. I mean, there are options and there are choices, and you can make the best of a shit situation. I don't see how this is now such, yeah. Anywho, continue.
No fairy tale divorces.
Yeah.
So this fatherlessness is something that's very, very specific. And when 4 in 10 children are born outside marriage, and most children to less educated parents are born outside marriage, then we have to reinvent what it means to be a father. Because right now, men are still being held to an old standard of what it meant to be a successful father in a world where that is neither possible for many of them or even desirable. Because
again, the second point where he's actually making some sense, because
Yes, I agree with that. Men needs to step away from this. I need to be the sole breadwinner. I need to be this alpha male. I need to be this provider and protector. They need to step away from that mindset because it's not helping them at all.
being a father should just basically being the parent who happens to be male.
Yeah, yeah. There shouldn't be a difference between the two. Both should wipe the eyes and wipe the snot off and feed them, put food in their mouth. It's like you're the parent. Do some teaching or whatever people do with kids. I have no idea. I have no kids.
I have no kids either.
Pass.
But what does a good father do? Well, what does a good mother do? Only it's a guy doing it.
Yeah.
That's the difference.
Yeah, and there shouldn't actually be a difference. Both should mentor the kid. Both should be concerned about the kid's emotional well-being. Both should be concerned about how this kid is actually learning in school and how they can support this kid. Both should be concerned about does the kid have enough food, school supplies, whatever the kid might need. There's a fucking mountain of needs for a human being, a little human being to be raised, and then both parents should equally contribute to that. It shouldn't be I'm the man, so I should be doing this, and she's the woman, so she should be wiping the snot and the shit. Or yeah, it doesn't work like that.
Yeah, I remember actually one episode of Step by Step
Yeah,
where where Frank was worried that his daughter was being too was being completely taken away by this other guy who who was her best friend's father, who because he was much more fun than he was. But then at the end, she talked about how Frank was the one who was holding her hair while she was when she was throwing up over the toilet when she was sick and all that other stuff, and how
yeah. So be present. I think be present in your kid's life. That's
yeah, and
basically it.
that's the
Notice shit
yeah,
and be present.
and that was in the 1990s. That do you remember that show?
Yeah, vaguely, step by step. Used to watch it a bit. I think when I was younger. But yeah,
Yeah, that was a rare moment that a TV show actually gave some good ideas.
yeah,
we've seen is as women have grown in economic power and economic independence, then of course they're going to choose to be with a man rather than being forced to, as in the old days. This is probably the greatest liberation in human history, honestly, that women can now choose.
If only it were more often that case.
yeah. Because you still have cohesive, controlling relationship everywhere. But anywho,
Not but to mention religions that tell women that they are obligated to find him.
yeah, the value lies in them being a mother. That's what religion teaches you: being somebody's wife and somebody's mother, and that's your value, and that's it. You need to
Granted,
stop.
hashtag not all religious groups say that hashtag, but it
Not
in
all men. Hashtag.
whether to be with a man or not. More than 2 out of 5 households in the US now, a woman is the main breadwinner. 40% of American women earn more than the average man. These are huge economic changes and all for the good. But it does pose some really sharp questions about what fathers are for. And until we escape,
what are fathers for? I think we kind of answered that one here, right? They're to
Yeah,
be
and it's
fathers, or they're to be parents.
yeah, and it's the same with what are fathers for. It's the same as finding your own purpose or value for things. You decide for yourself that I have value in this, or this is my purpose, or I don't have a purpose. I just live, or I'm just here. And it's the same as what sort of father are you? Are you present in your kid's life? It's not that you're the father and your purpose is now to provide, to make all the money, and to sit on your ass at night watching TV because you. That's not being a father. So yeah.
the obsolete model of the breadwinner father, then we will continue to see more and more men being left out of family life. And the kicker is that boys in families that don't have a father presence suffer much more than girls. And so then what happens is that male disadvantage can become intergenerational
because also these boys are also being raised in a society where they're expected to follow a a gendered path. So
Yeah, yeah,
so
and
that also
society is
prevents
also teaching them. Yeah, society is
what?
teaching that to them, and society is also teaching them that they don't have to work as hard because they have privilege, because they have dicks, so they're good, and that's what they've been taught. And now they have to find a wife, and they have to be a father, and they have to make the most money, and then they have to be the provider and the protector, and that's them. And if they don't have that purpose or value anymore, then what am I? What sort of man or father am I? And that's the dumbest questions you can be asking, because you're looking at it the wrong way. And women, as is pointed out, women has grown and adapted. Why the fuck can't men grow and adapt? Are they morons or something? I don't get it. Women have adapted. Why can't men? Are they just idiots? So help me out.
Also, one other thing cringe about saying that that child has to have a male presence in the home is it hasn't this been used against same-sex couples?
Yeah, that you have to have both genders in a family. That's not true. There's a lot of single parents out there as well, and they do brilliantly with kids. You don't always have to have two parents, for example, of any gender in a family unit, for that family unit to be functioning optimally and functioning well.
Well,
He's
raising a
competing between
child
the two.
well, raising a child by yourself without anyone to help you can be difficult, but is there any reason why it has to be one man and one woman? Why can't it be two men or two women?
Two women. Exactly.
Because I
So he's
frankly it is true, that it can be a bit overwhelming to raise a child without anyone else helping you. It can be
yeah, and still there's a lot of women that actually do that. There is a
yeah.
lot of women that actually raise children all by themselves, and they manage and they make it work. And it's wrong that they have to, but it's happened, and they make the best of it. Um, yeah, that's something that upset me as well when he said that um, boys have to have a man's presence in the house. Why? What are they supposed to get from this man that they don't get from this woman, or two men or two women, like you said? Like I don't get that. It's not like there's some special powers he's going to give his little boy. It's just dumb. It's just dumb.
If the fathers are struggling and therefore not really involved in their kids' lives, then the boys are the ones who suffer most, who will then go on to struggle themselves in education and the labour market.
Not true.
Yeah, I
The
agree.
boys don't have to. The boys don't have to have a man present in their life, and if they don't, that they will suffer. That's not true.
They need good parents, whatever gender those parents are. The
Exactly.
child
That's
needs
all
good
they need.
parents.
That's all they need. Agree.
Marriage and social institutions and a sense of purpose matter to men. And so, as we've seen these real challenges faced by men in education, work, and family, you're seeing some really difficult and troubling health consequences. And so, the so called deaths of despair from suicide, overdose, or alcohol, 3 times higher among men than among women.
Again, I'm pretty sure that people who are conditioned by society to never talk about their feelings are probably going to be at more risk of these deaths by
Yes.
despair.
Yes. They are taught they shouldn't be feeling stuff. They shouldn't be crying. It's a feminine thing. It's a girl thing. And so why would they show emotion? And it's so fucking dumb because we're both human. We both have the same brains. We both have emotion. Why is it okay for one to show emotion and not the other? And why is emotion seen as something that is weak? We all feel that. It's, yeah, I don't know. And then his thing about men find purpose in marriage, status, and a job. And I'm thinking, yeah, I don't think all men do. I think your typical male of the 1950s, and if you still raise men that way, would see that way. But there's a lot of people that don't want to get married these days. You don't have to be married to have a good relationship with another human being. You don't even have to be married to have kids. He's like earlier he made another point of there's 4 out of 10 kids that is born out of wedlock. And I thought, well, what the does that matter? Why does marriage suddenly make it okay to have kids? Why do you have to be married to have kids? That makes no point. Like marriage doesn't suddenly make everything okay, and now the kid is healthy and happy because he's got 2 parents that are married. Like kids needs parents that are present and actually notices things, and that's it.
Indeed.
Suicide itself, 3 times higher among men and women, and rising very quickly, especially among middle aged men and younger men. So we can see these as symptoms, I think, of a broader malaise, which is what's troubling boys and men. And for men in particular, this sense of purpose is very important. I think it's a human universal that we need to be needed. There's a wonderful piece of work by
It could be also that basically a sense of purpose is not just a thing that is uniquely needed only by men.
Agree. It's something that all humans work out for themselves, and it's something my therapist would like throw his eyes to the heavens for. That you need this purpose and you need to be needed. That thing about all people need to be needed, and that's yeah, maybe not. Why do you need to be needed? Why can't you just emotionally look after yourself? You don't need to be needed by other people because then other people could essentially not need you anymore, and then suddenly you've lost your value or your purpose. That seems dumb to me. If you're going to be like I am enough for me, whether another person needs me or wants me is irrelevant. I am enough for me, and you should look after yourself emotionally. Yeah, something my therapist would always eyes to the heavens for is that I need to be needed. You would just lose it at that point.
And speaking of also high suicide rates, there's also a very high suicide rate among transgender people because transgender people are often treated very bad by society, but in some places more so than others. And one place where transgender people are treated especially badly is in the southern United States. And
Yes.
I wish there was a thing I could do to help everybody, but at least let's help Alfred. Alfred is a transgender person who's trying to get out of the southern United States. He's set up a GoFundMe page. I'm going to, for just a moment, put the QR code to his GoFundMe on the screen here. And I also would highly, and I'm also going to also put a link to his GoFundMe in this video's YouTube video description area. And I put a link to his GoFundMe on my page of links, which is at redangelsophia.com. Remember, I spell Sophia with a PH. redangelsophia.com. And I understand that you might not have money to help Alfred, but if you do have money to help Alfred, please help him get out of the southern United States. You could be saving a life by doing so.
An academic called Fiona Shand, who looked at the last words that men had used to describe themselves before committing suicide or attempting suicide. And the top of the list were worthless and useless. I think if we create a society in which so many men do feel like they're not needed, then it's no surprise that we see these deaths of despair. We see problems with opioids. Opioids are a much bigger problem for men than they are for women.
Again, I'm pretty sure that it would help if men were not conditioned to not talk about their feelings.
Yes. And again, I can't stress this enough. You give yourself value, and you need to need yourself. And you need to not be obsessed that other people have to need you or other people have to see a use in you, because then you'll always be fucking unhappy. Because that's, people don't work that way. You need to look after your mental health for yourself. So you need to be enough for yourself, and you need to need yourself and look after yourself. You can't always say, no, I have to be needed by other people, and I have to be wanted by other people, and I have to have a use for other people. That just seems like you're setting yourself up for heartache and disaster. If you tie your own mental health and mental happiness over what use you have for other people or what purpose you have to other people, that seems pretty dumb to do. But yeah.
And I think there's an area where capitalism feeds into toxic masculinity, in that many times workplaces will kind of push people to make work everything that they're about, and to the neglect of other things about their life.
Yeah. Having a good therapist helps. Helps you see these things and understand these things. Making sure you've got good work-life balance is important. And I don't think that's something the US really strives for, but it's something Australia does. So, yeah.
And one of the great tragedies of opioid deaths is the death rates are higher in part because the users are on their own. And so in some ways, the opioid epidemic is a perfect illustration of a whole series of things we're talking about, which is a loss of role in the family, a loss of status in the labor market, turning to drugs, and being isolated and withdrawn. And so in that example, I think you can see a symptom of this broader male malaise that we just need to take it more seriously.
And taking it more seriously means not ignoring things like toxic masculinity,
Which is not addressing. And it keeps going back to this role thing. Have you noticed? He keeps saying roles. Role in the family, role in the workplace, gender role this, gender role that. And I think roles by themselves are harmful to people, because it puts people in these boxes where, and we don't fit in boxes at all. And then there's this expectation that you need to be in this box or fit this role, and people just don't. So it's just harmful.
We have a cultural responsibility as a society, men and women together, to help men and boys to adjust to this new world. Because right now, many of them are really struggling.
So
and I agree with his last point. Yeah, and I agree with his last point, that men and women need to work together to help men in this thing, because they are struggling. So, yeah, the men are being left behind. That is the thing. Women are adapting, men aren't. Again, men need to also take that responsibility on themselves to adapt It's not something we need to now hold their hands. We're not their mothers. Like, look inwardly, do some work on yourself, and adjust and adapt. It's not hard. We did it.
So, anyways, so any last words to add about this video?
I think, as a start, boys need to be taught that it's okay to be equal to girls, and it's okay to go after any job they want. It's okay to do a nursing job, and there shouldn't be this label of masculine jobs and feminine jobs. Jobs are jobs, and that any person that wants to do it should be able and encouraged to go and do it. And I think that's a thing about our society where we are doing this wrong, is where we tell boys they have to be X, and we tell girls they have to be X, and boys you have to do this job, and girls you have to do that job, and it's just harmful for everybody. And then you will find less women in certain areas or less men in certain areas. And it's a thing where you need to change the societal thinking behind it, which is definitely not addressing at all. It's just saying, oh, there's a gender gap and there's an inequality towards men. And I was like, yeah, cool. So let's address the thinking behind that, because that's the problem, is the thinking behind that. So yeah. Glad we did this.
Yes. And anyways, the opinions of my guests are not necessarily my opinions, nor those of my cat Amber, nor those of the monster hovering over my bed, nor are they necessarily the opinions of the gremlin possessing my elevator. And for that matter, my opinions at the time of me making an episode are not necessarily my opinions at a later time either. But anyways, if there's any other video that anyone in the audience thinks I should tear down, by all means, let me know. You can join my Discord to let me know about it. There's a channel set up on my Discord specifically for that purpose. You can find an invite link to my Discord on my page of links, which is redangelsophia.com. Again, I spell Sophia with a PH. And any information you want to give?
No, I'm just, like I said, usually behind the scenes helping with Skeptic Haven. And then, yeah, I have a Discord server for people of all religions and backgrounds to come hang out, called Heretic Hideout. So if you're interested in joining, yeah, you're welcome to come and join us.
Yeah, I love Heretic Hideout.
Thank you.
I love Heretic Hideout. But anyways, thank you so much for being here.
Yes, thank you for having me. I had loads of fun. This was fun. Bitching and ranting about things. It was fun.
Indeed.